Recording in progress.
Good evening, everyone. It being 7:01 and a quorum present with Mr. Donaldson attending remotely, I'm going to call this September 11th meeting of the Plymouth Planning Board to order. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law on March 29, 2023, this meeting will be conducted via remote and in-person participation. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public can be found on the town's website. I'm going to ask everyone, please, to make sure that all cell phones are silenced. Yeah, are the microphones working properly? I agree, they don't sound like they're on. I know they are, but they're definitely... I will try to do better. Before we begin tonight's meeting, I just want to reflect on the day. September 11, 2001 is a day that changed the course of history. Almost 3,000 people were killed that day in New York, Washington, D.C., and Pennsylvania, and an equal number have since died as a result of exposure to hazardous materials during rescue and recovery operations at Ground Zero. Following these events, we came together as a community to support one another. In the memory and honor of those who lost and gave their lives on that day, I encourage everyone to rekindle that spirit in all that we do as a town. And I ask that we take a moment of silence to remember them. Thank you, everyone. First on our agenda this evening is our administrative notes, beginning with the minutes of July 10, 2024. Do we have any questions, comments from members of the board? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second? Mr. Donaldson, will you second? Thank you. I have a motion and a second. As Mr. Donaldson's remote, we will do this as a roll call vote. Mr. Grandy?
Abstain. Yes.
Mr. Bennett? Mr. Donaldson?
Yes.
And myself, yes. We have no covenants, plans, or releases this evening, so next on our agenda are Form A plans. First is A4884 E. Russell Wailuda, lot line adjustment, map 69, lot 56. Any questions from the board?
No questions.
Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
Make a motion to endorse.
I have a motion to endorse. Do I have a second?
Second.
A motion second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Mr. Donaldson?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Grandy?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Next, we have A4885, Mario A. Atriani. I apologize if I got that name wrong. Ardiano, thank you. Lot line adjustment, map 050, lot 4K-004. Any questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to be recusing myself for this one.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Anything further from the board?
No.
Seeing nothing, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to endorse.
I have a motion. Mr. Donaldson, will that be a second?
That will be a second.
Fine. I will call the roll then. Mr. Grandy?
Yes.
Mr. Donaldson?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Mr. Bennett, recused. Next on our agenda is announcements. First announcement is that tomorrow, September 12th, the Open Space and Master Plan Committees will be holding a joint listening session to discuss future planning for open space in Plymouth. It is at the Public Library on South Street, starting at 6 p.m. All are welcome and encouraged to attend. Next, a note that last night the Select Board voted to advance and recommend for town meeting approval the Planning Board's article for a land bank for Plymouth. On behalf of this board, I encourage everyone to learn what is actually being proposed by visiting the Planning Department page on the town's website. And finally, the Plymouth Center Steering Committee will be meeting on Wednesday, September 18, in the Shallop Room here at Town Hall at 7 p.m. Please check the town's website for the agenda 48 hours in advance. Are there any other announcements from members of the board? Seeing none, I'll move to our next agenda item. First, we have an appointment to the Master Plan Committee. Emily Tompkins. Ms. Tompkins?
Hello.
Good evening.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. So we have an opening due to the resignation of a member on the Master Plan Committee. Ms. Tompkins has been good enough to apply for that. So just going to open it up to you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you and why you want to be on the Master Plan Committee?
Excellent. I have something prepared here. So I'm Emily Tompkins. I'm 32 and a lifelong resident of Plymouth. I grew up in the downtown area and rented there for the past 7 years with my husband. Over the past 2 years of being committed to setting my roots in Plymouth, we just moved to our home in South Plymouth. My interest in the Master Plan Committee stems from growing up in our beautiful town, my most immediate family living here, and God willing, I plan to live here for the next 60 years. The long-term development and growth of our town is incredibly important to me. There are many competing needs in our town, and I do believe we can strike a balance. Resident engagement is crucial to that puzzle. I got involved with volunteerism over the past 2 years because I wanted to have a positive impact in the town I love. Currently, I'm on the Advisory and Finance Committee, and I've been getting valuable direct experience learning how a complex form of local government works. I also volunteer for 2 other Plymouth-based nonprofits focusing on communication and public education. My day job is working in communications and development at a local human services nonprofit. There, I support fundraising and marketing, manage projects related to internal communications, and I lead a DEI subcommittee focused on engaging staff. I will bring a unique perspective as a recent renter, a young person, and a woman to this committee. This, combined with my volunteer and work experience, my love of Plymouth, makes me an excellent candidate for the Master Plan Committee. I look forward to insisting in engaging the community and aid in building what will be the guiding document for town decision-making that will impact immediate and long-term development of Plymouth.
Thank you. Questions from the board? Mr. Bennett?
No questions. Just I want to say thank you for your volunteerism and your participation.
Mr. Donaldson?
I have no questions. I just, again, want to say thank you for volunteering for this position, and more people in the community like you are needed. So thank you for your service.
Thank you, Mr. Donaldson. Mr. Grandy?
Ditto. I appreciate it. Thank you very much for applying.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Grandy. I'm just going to say the exact same thing, which is you are a great example to our younger people who we truly need to engage in this community. The master plan is a document about the future of our community, and we certainly need people who are going to be living with and working with that document and that future. So I thank you for your volunteerism. Do I have a motion?
Motion to appoint Emily Tompkins to the Master Plan Committee.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Grandy?
Yes.
Mr. Donaldson?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Congratulations. Thank you. Look forward to seeing you at the next meeting.
Thank you very much.
Next on our agenda, we have a site plan review update, ADM Use Area 15, Cranberry Commons Senior Affordable Housing.
I'm just going to hand out a few of the copies of the presentation.
Great, thank you very much. And now for the edification of the board and for the public, before you begin, after our last meeting, it had been brought to the attention of the planning department that certain of the restrictions and conditions that this body imposed were contrary to what the state would allow, given that this is a state, in part, state-sponsored project. So the proposals here tonight are to address those concerns and considerations. That's the reason that they're coming forward. There's no change per se in what we're doing, but this is their response in order to comply with our conditions and at the same time meet the state requirements. Good evening. Please introduce yourself and proceed.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman Bolton, members of the board. My name is Evan Miller, representing the Red Brook community this evening. I'm joined by Walter Ahanian, representing the Grantham Group. As Mr. Bolton noted, pardon me real quick, can we pull up the PowerPoint if that's available? It's listed UA 15. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize. Thank you. Excellent. As Chairman Bolton noted, on August 15th, this project received a 4-0 vote of approval. As part of the draft that was written for the report, there were certain conditions outlined that we needed to return to this board to explain further information on either sizes or types of material and ways we were going to address that. Those plans have been returned to the town, and this evening we would like to walk you through what those changes are. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Ahanian.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chairman Bolton, for also explaining a little bit about the reason why we're here tonight. So one of the issues that we had a concern with was parking. As I had mentioned during our presentation, the original site plan had shown 65 spaces for 62 apartments. Traditional in this type of housing, based on the income restrictions and the rent reductions that we have for these units, we'd see anywhere between 60 and 70% of the residents have cars. And then which in a 62-unit community, we'd be roughly 44 spaces for residents, and the remaining would be for visitors. And so we felt that the number 65 was more than sufficient of what was necessary, but based on some of the feedback that we received, it was asked if we could possibly come back every year for the next 5 years and kind of give an update on the parking situation, and then potentially be held responsible for increasing those amount of spaces. So getting to a closing with this date would be difficult because it's really an unknown quantity or amount that could actually occur. So what we did is we actually proposed an additional 5 spaces. So our site plan will show we went from 65 to 70. In addition, another area of concern that we had, or not necessarily concern, but an area that we think we can actually do better at than what was requested of us, one was that grass pavers be used to service the emergency access road, and that can be done with basically concrete blocks, and what you do is you then fill in an area with those blocks of grass. What happens during many months is that will actually burn out. So there is a product that's out there that allows for turf to be reinforced, and we feel that that's a better product and will actually suit the need of what the town's looking for. So it's not gravel, that it is a nice area of grass that you'll see, and it will be able to withstand the weight of the fire department. And once again, obviously assuming the fire department ultimately signs off on it, which we anticipate that they would. Another area of concern that was brought to our attention were some outdoor amenities, just making sure that we had them. So on the updated plan, we're actually showing 2 spots, one of which is covered at the entrance, showing a seating area for the residents, and the other is a little picnic area for the residents that's also out front so they can see who's coming and going. And then lastly was the screening of the landscaping. So what we did is we actually increased the caliper size of the quantity of actual plantings that we're doing. So I'm going to have Evan come back up and just kind of go through those themselves, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have on what we've proposed.
Thank you, Walter. So what we're showing here is a copy of the plan as was resubmitted. As Walter noted, we've increased the parking by the 5 additional spaces, which are shown highlighted in the pink purple. The emergency access area we have identified as a 20-foot wide fiber reinforced turf emergency vehicle access. We chose both fiber reinforced for the reason that Walter had noted, but also it's a product that we've used out on site before over in use area 6, so it's consistent with a product that we have on site. The outdoor amenity areas, as noted, we have the covered area with benches as you come into the project entry, and then we also have the small area that provides accessible access right in this area right in there. And then finally, from the landscape standpoint, what we've done is, as noted, with the unknown of final locations of utilities, what we did was across the board, we increased either the height and spread of the shrubs and some of the smaller plant material, and then increased the caliper sizes from what's typically installed. That gives us the highest and best flexibility to use larger plant material to actively screen what's been requested of the board to meet the intent of the condition. And with that, I can open it up to any questions.
First, let me bring it back to staff. Ms. Lind?
Pursuant to the board's approval of this revised site plan, we can issue a revised statement of recommendation to the building commissioner that conditions 2, 3, 4, and 6 of the August 15th decision are approved and satisfied as of this revised plan.
Thank you. Is there any member of the public who wishes to comment on this?
I would like to.
Very good.
It's someone on Zoom.
Very good. If you please identify yourself and proceed.
Sure. Name's Keith Gravlin, 4 River Birch Way in Red Brook. I think the residents are totally behind this project now, and I understand with the state restrictions that the parking is going to have to be locked in at the 70 spots. We just want to get it out there as some of us concerned residents that we still think parking in that area will be an issue, especially once they build out other commercial pieces. So we just want to get that on record that totally support the plan. We understand Grantham needs to submit to the state a definitive plan so the state can buy into it. But I just want to get it on public record that we still think we're going to have parking concerns, and hopefully ADM will work with us down the road when they start building out other commercial pieces in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gravelin. Anyone else? Machine.
I wasn't planning to comment on this, but Makepeace is in the process of expanding its most recent use area, which is around Garden Road. And they've got an order of conditions from the Conservation Commission for the first part of that road. So I would urge all of the residents and everyone to be looking at the maximum build out at Red Brook. If you're looking at traffic for this project, you should be looking at traffic for all the new homes that are going to be around Deer Pond, circling that area. So there's going to be a lot more development there. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No one else on Zoom, Ms. Lind?
If anyone else on Zoom would like to be recognized, please notify us by either raising your hand or speaking. Seeing no one.
Seeing no one, I'm going to bring it back to the board. Any questions for the applicant? Mr. Bennett?
I think the modifications are appropriate and fairly clear. I don't have any further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Grandy?
No questions, and thank you for working on what we wanted to see done as far as the landscaping, the buildings to accommodate a patio setting, and also not the grassy pavers, but reinforcement of that access road. Sure. I said grassy pavers because I'm an old guy, that's what we used to use. 15, 20 years ago. So I read up on the product that you actually mentioned on the plans, and I liked it.
Yeah.
Really did. So I
Excellent.
appreciate everything you've done as far as meeting the requirements and requests that we had asked for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grandy. Mr. Donaldson?
I just want to say I'm pleased, happy, and I'm satisfied, and I'm grateful for them coming back and taking in consideration all our recommendations and doing what they've been doing. So I don't have any other questions, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Donaldson. I have no questions for you either, so with that, I will entertain a motion to recommend to the building commissioner that these changes satisfy the stated conditions set forth in our original vote of approval.
A motion so made.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Mr. Grandy?
Yes.
Mr. Donaldson?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you, we appreciate it. Have a nice evening.
Next on our agenda is a public hearing for a citizen's petition to change zoning bylaw 205-10. This has been otherwise referred to around town as the Benny's Plaza bylaw. I will note that this request has been withdrawn. However, as it has been formally advertised as a public hearing, we have a small formality that we have to go through. So let me begin by saying the Planning Board will hold a public hearing in the 1820 Courtroom, Town Hall, 26 Court Street, Plymouth, Massachusetts, on Wednesday, September 11, 2024, at 7:05 p.m. to discuss a proposed zoning bylaw amendment received through a citizen's petition to amend the zoning bylaw, Section 205-10, General Commercial, and the use table and footnotes thereto, by modifying multifamily use by special permit conditions in that portion of the general commercial district within 2,500 feet of the downtown harbor district, by modifying the conditions set forth in footnote 1 of the use table, by adding new subsection D, or take any other action relative thereto. A copy of the proposed petition is available and may be inspected at the office of the town clerk and the Department of Planning and Development. Any person interested in desiring to be heard on this request should appear at the time and place designated. Again, we have been instructed that this is a no motion, no action petition. Nothing will be going forward. So, with that, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing.
So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion? I'll take the roll. Mr. Grandy?
Yes.
Mr. Donaldson?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
And myself, yes. The matter is closed, no motion taken. Next on our agenda this evening is a site plan review for 71 Hedges Pond Road, Standish Investment Group, Unified Complex, 4 commercial buildings. I am going to let people know, in case it has not been stated earlier, this is an informational presentation only. The proponent is going to be presenting to the planning board. The planning board may ask questions, after which time the matter will be continued. It will be continued in part because the matter has also been referred to the Cedarville Steering Committee, which has yet to hear the matter. There will be no public comment tonight. Public comment will be allowed and will be part of any future hearing, at which time the planning board may undertake a vote. So right now this is informational so that everyone can hear what is being suggested. I'm not even going to say it's a final proposal, because a final proposal can certainly be altered any time before we undertake a vote. I'll also note for the record that we have been requested to allow, and will allow, of course, recording of this. So members of the public who are in the audience should be aware that there is a member of the public who has requested and will be recording this matter. Yes, Ms. Sheehan. Thank you. Thank you for your clarification. You've requested it, and we're noting it. Thank you for notifying us. Please proceed.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board, Mr. Donaldson on remote, if you're over there. Attorney Rob D'Ambrosio here for this project. I've got a slide deck. Lauren, is that on there? If I may, I'd like to kind of give you an overview of the project, the history of the site, and then, certainly happy to field any questions. Okay, so here we are. That's obviously the cover. So first I'll introduce the project team. So the applicant for this project is a limited liability company, Standish Investment Group, LLC. I have with me tonight the principal, Eric Pontiff, of that entity. As I said, Rob D'Ambrosio for the record, D'Ambrosio Law here in Plymouth. And I've got with me Kevin Flaherty from our civil engineering firm, Flaherty and Stefani. So I thought I'd start out by just giving everyone, if you're not aware, an overview of where this project is sited. And as you can see, it's in the Cedarville neighborhood, Hedges Pond Road, borders, if you can see my cursor, to the west, just off the highway. Here's the capped landfill here. And again, the exit ramp there for Route 3. So again, why we're here tonight, Mr. Bolton did, of course, read the notice, but all commercial projects in this town are subject to site plan review, this being no exception. And specifically for this project, we are seeking a determination from this board that this is a unified complex. The zoning bylaw allows under the unified complex provisions multiple principal uses on a single lot, multiple principal structures, in this case being 4 structures. So again, we'll get into the site plan a bit more in the presentation here, excuse me. But this is an overview. So again, as I mentioned, we've got 4 proposed structures on site. We've got the largest structure here, 176,000 square feet. We've got a smaller structure here, and then 2 adjacent structures. You've had a chance to review the plan, but just for those who haven't, this is proposed as a warehouse, or identified as a warehouse. This as an ice rink that could accommodate 2 rinks, in fact, based on the size. And these are proposed as potential lumber yard facilities here with the 2 20,000 square foot structures here on this portion of the site. Again, this is a rendering, gives you an idea of what the entrance is going to look like and some of the landscaping, just a visual. I think it's worth pointing out that the driveway, such as it is really spec to be constructed as a road in terms of width, grade, type of construction. So it's a significant roadway to access the site. And again, just going back, you can see it comes off Hedges Pond, kind of wraps around the outside of the site, and then enters the site, circulation throughout. Fire's had a chance to look at it in terms of fire truck apparatus circulation. DPW's weighed in on it as well. So I thought I'd spend a few minutes, because this is kind of a unique project and a unique site, talking about the history of this site. The point being here that I think the history is important, because tonight and this project is just the culmination of what's happened on this site for many, many years, and the efforts of the municipality, a nonprofit foundation which currently owns the site, and other interested parties that have got us to this point. So I think it's important to have some historical context here. This is not a project that you might see where a private developer comes forth, identifies or finds a parcel, and proposes a project. It really kind of worked quite differently here. The town designated this area for development, conveyed the property to a quasi-public entity, I'll call it, issued essentially requests for bids to develop it to its maximum economic potential. Here we have the product of many years of work that led to that. So again, very briefly here, the town first acquired this parcel along with much of the adjacent area. Our project site, our lot's about 33 acres, maybe 34. But this was part of a much larger acquisition In the year I was born, 1977, 175 acres were acquired, designated or intended at the time for a future landfill. And in fact, there was a landfill built on a portion of the land. That landfill has been decommissioned, so to speak. It's been capped. Again, as you can see in the next kind of bullet there, plans to expand the landfill kind of fell to the wayside, and for many years, the site lay fallow. In 2018, after a couple years of effort in the background, it was brought forth to town meeting the intention to rezone this site and designate it for development. So again, what happened in 2018? The fall town meeting was held, and the warrant article was twofold. One, to amend the zoning bylaw to create a new zoning district, the Cedarville Village Enterprise District. That district designates, as you're aware, at least the board's aware, a range of uses, commercial, light industrial, et cetera. And then this site, along with some of the adjacent property, was designated as that district. Also, at that town meeting, the town voted to transfer 134 acres of nearby land to the Conservation Commission for their custody and stewardship. That was really done, I think, because some of this was being designated for development. They conveyed, 4 or 5 times the acreage that was designated for development to conservation, sort of for environmental bona fides, I'll say. So again, this is a visual here. This gives you an idea. Down here is the edge of the development portion of our site, the edge of the lot line, really. And this is the 134 approximate acres that were conveyed to conservation. So that gives you an idea of sort of what was on the table in the town meeting. Specifically, this is the slide that was presented at town meeting, just for your reference. You can see not only does this slide reference that conservation area that I thought was a little better illustrated on the previous slide, but also talks about the buffer. So again, this site was designed for development quite consciously, and one of those design features was the creation of an unusually large buffer here to the east of the site. This is a 300-foot buffer, a no-touch buffer. Again, that was designed to assuage any concerns relative to the neighborhoods here to the east. And again, as you're aware, typically when you have a buffer, it's 50 feet sometimes, a buffer between zoning districts, between residential and other types of zoning districts. 50 feet's required. Again, we've got a 300-foot buffer here. So this was all quite consciously designed by staff, by the planning department, and walked through town meeting. In fact, there were quite a few bodies involved in this project in the early going here. You can see them right here. I'll read them for you. The Cedarville Steering Committee, obviously the local steering committee that is probably represents the most immediate neighborhood interests, they supported the article. This board supported the article. The Open Space Committee supported the article, and I think, I'd have to check the archives, but I think it's quite rare. This article was unanimously approved in 2018. So this was a product of many interested parties and resulted in a quite favorable outcome. Let's fast forward a little bit. So again, as I mentioned, 2018 was when the stage was set for the development, but the efforts obviously started a couple years before that. The town engaged engineers, designed the site thoughtfully, as I pointed out with the buffer, analyzed what was appropriate for the development. When the zoning bylaw was written, obviously there was cognizance of what uses were appropriate for this neighborhood, for the site, what the town's vision was for this site. And then in 2022, after town meeting, obviously, the town conveyed this land to the Plymouth Regional Economic Development Foundation, who currently owns the site. My client is under contract to purchase the site. So today, where are we today? How did we get here? I think it's worth noting a little bit of the history of the recent efforts by the foundation to develop the site. So they've entertained a number of bids, sought the highest and best use, best for the community, best for the economy, et cetera. Others have tried and failed. Mr. Pontiff, his LLC, they're not the first ones to take a stab at this thing. Others have come in, either have walked from the project due to concerns with this challenging site. Others have come in, as you could see in kind of that orange bullet, at a higher price, is my understanding. And the foundation, sought the best and highest use of the site, which is what my applicant has brought forth. So again, the bidding process was robust. Presentations were made with great specificity about proposed development. And this is the one that the foundation has asked to champion development here. Again, and I think it's worth pointing out, again, among all the developers that you could have handling this site, this is not a developer that's going to come, build, and disappear. You know, my client's a Plymouth native. He's got long roots in Plymouth, third generation cranberry grower, among other things, and he's here for the long term. So I think it's nice to have someone local who's taking the town's vision forth. So what's happened recently in terms of permitting? We've been through conservation. There was a small isolated wetland on the site. They approved the project. We filed a Massachusetts Endangered Species Act application to the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, and they have approved of that application and deemed that the project can move forward. We're going to meet with Cedarville Steering next week. Again, that will give this board time to receive their direct feedback, you know, obviously apart from what was given in 2018, because this hearing is going to be continued. So we're going to see them next week. And then, of course, I think it bears mentioning, you know, the final project is going to be subject to yet further approval. This is not the last stop, nor is Cedarville Steering. You know, zoning permit needs to be applied for, building permit, and of course occupancy permit. So the project still has a bit of a way to go procedurally, but we're doing our level best to move it along. So why is the project appropriate for this neighborhood? Well, first of all, again, to reiterate a bit what I said, in 2018, the zoning bylaw was custom designed for this site. The Cedarville Village Enterprise District was developed with a suite of uses, some by right, some by special permit, some disallowed, of course, that fit with this site. So again, this was not a creature of some creative development. You know, we're fitting, this project is fitting into exactly what was specified by the town at town meeting. I think it's worth noting when the planning board made their recommendation at town meeting, again, they designated that 134 acres as conservation land. I think that's certainly a boon to the neighborhood. You know, and again, that acreage is far in excess of the 33, nearly 34 acres that this site constitutes, only a portion of which is, of course, going to be developed. Why else is it appropriate for the neighborhood? Well, this site, fortunately, you can get out to Route 3 from this site without passing any residential neighborhoods. Again, this was all conscious. This was all by design, not someone trying to squeeze a project in where it doesn't belong. Quite the contrary. I mentioned the 300-foot buffer, and again, in terms of, you know, that's your protection to the one side. To the south, you've got the capped landfill. I don't think anyone there is going to be bothered by this project. And then to the north, you've got an industrial use. So again, consciously designed by the town, brought forth by the town, approved by the citizens of the town. What are the benefits to the town? As most of you are aware, but for those who aren't, $2 million when this transaction closes are going to be earmarked for traffic improvements. Now, is that enough to, you know, build a rotary? No, but it's enough to start a project that's been talked about for many, many years. It's a first step toward improving the traffic in and around Hedges Pond, particularly where it intersects with State Road. So that, you know, again, this is a monumental first step toward solving a problem that's existed for a very long time. And again, this was all quite consciously laid out. Furthermore, this project also contemplates some improvement to Hedges Pond itself in terms of drainage. What else? Again, this is coming out of that 2018 recommendation from the planning board to bolster the town meeting. Site's location is within a village center and its close proximity to Exit 2, not Exit 2 anymore, makes it an excellent site for economic development activity. Again, that's what this site is for. That's what its best use is for. The town continues to explore options to increase its non-residential tax base and to provide quality employment opportunities for its residents. This initiative represents one such option, economic development. No coincidence that the current steward of the property is the Economic Development Foundation. Again, so in addition to jobs, commercial tax base, I think we've got some uses here. And again, when I mentioned, you know, why is my client moving forward and when others didn't, these are desirable uses. You know, lumber yards are useful and critical in some cases to local businesses. The ice rink is a tremendous public amenity if that comes to fruition like we hope it does. So there's extreme topography on this site. You've had a chance to look at the plans. The elevations on this site vary from 26 feet to I think 150, 160 feet. You know, I think part of the reason that this site has languished, if you want to call it that, since 2018, since it was designated for development, is it's challenging to develop this site. It's not a cookie cutter site, far from it. It requires a lot of grading. There's no two ways about it, and I know that's something that folks are interested in. You know, with every commercial project of any scale, you're going to take or add material to the site. That's almost a given. In this case, some material is going to be taken off-site to accommodate the design to get a nice level pad for these new structures. It bears mentioning some material is coming off-site, but the vast majority is staying on-site. So again, of all the grading that's happening, there are low areas to fill, earth needs to be moved and leveled, so there's a huge earth-moving operation here. Only a fraction of that earth being moved is actually being moved off of the site. So the zoning bylaw use table for the Cedarville Village Enterprise District indicates that earth removal is permitted by right if it's incidental. There's no special permit required for incidental earth removal. Again, is it incidental? I'd say so. We've got a 30-plus acre site, 33-acre site, the majority of which is being developed. You know, we've got approximately 350,000 yards coming off site, cubic yards, but that's really de minimis relative to the size of the site. Again, if you want to look at it in economic terms, what does it cost to build these 4 large structures, level this site, put in the infrastructure, put in the roadway, et cetera? It's probably going to approach $100 million. We've got, as you can see on the slide, the raw value of the material coming off site is a tiny fraction, less than 2%, closer to 1.5% of that total valuation. Now again, there's been quite a bit of material online, social media, you know, again, kind of accusations or suggestions that this is some type of windfall, that this is a money-making enterprise in terms of sand. You know, the developer would never recoup even his purchase price by the value of the material coming off site. If the material were to be removed and sold, the amount that's intended to come off site, and the site to be even just graded out, the purchase price alone would put this project deeply in the red. So that's not what this project's about, just to be very clear. Again, I'm not even going to read this slide. I don't want to do justice to it or give it any more airtime, but you know, the notion that there's some massive windfall to the developer from the material that's coming off relative to the grading is just a fallacy. So nonetheless, we've got incidental earth removal. You know, in my view, and I hope the planning boards, we're not subject to special permit in this case. Nonetheless, my applicant is willing to accede to the types of conditions, or the actual conditions, I should say, this is verbatim from the zoning bylaw, that the Zoning Board of Appeals has to select from in the zoning bylaw relative to their regulation of earth removal were a special permit to be required. So again, it's a little much. I don't need to read every word. You guys, I'm happy to send this to you, but all of the regulations designed to provide for a safe, stable site with oversight that's not a nuisance, et cetera, we're willing to adopt all those voluntarily. Again, limited number of trips, a sensible route that's not disturbing any of the neighbors, industrial or otherwise, a sequencing plan, inspections, certifications from an engineer, all the conditions that the ZBA might want to see if this were subject to a special permit are acceptable to my client. Again, not going to be a large cut that sits open. It'll be stabilized and done in sections. And in fact, I think for geotechnical reasons, that's sensible as well. You don't want to have a big cut. You know, when you've got low areas, you've got to grade, compress, test, regrade, et cetera. So again, perfectly acceptable to stabilize and work this project in phases. Again, notice to the building commissioner as we approach completion, inspections, oversight, et cetera. A cash bond, again, you know, not something that is required, but you know, happy to do it in good faith to ensure that the developer is good to his word and stands behind the project and effectively puts his money where his mouth is. And again, a 3-year time limit is perfectly acceptable. Should be far quicker than that. So I've got with me Kevin Flaherty, as I mentioned. I think it's worth having him talk a little more about the earth removal, why it's proposed the way it is and kind of a little more about the profile and topography of the site, if that's okay with the board.
Absolutely, please proceed.
So Kevin Flaherty from Flaherty and Stefani. As you can see, what you see on the screen right now is basically the building pad as constructed without all the utilities and the buildings removed. We had this site for, we looked at the site first for the applicant maybe 3 or 4 years ago, when he was putting together his RFP. We tried multiple different options to get the best use out of the land as it sits. The topography is, there's not a flat spot on the lot. So what the applicant kept coming back and saying is, these are the people who would be coming in to buy the property. And I have interest from this standpoint and this standpoint. So really what we had to do to create the project to kind of get a base down was, was the square footage we needed at the bottom of the kind of the slope as a flat area to handle all sorts of development that would be coming through. The next step we talked about was we wanted to leave a 50-foot buffer at least up by Hedges Pond Road that would be undisturbed with, we would set a fence right at that line for safety due to a DPW comment, but we wouldn't touch that 50-foot section coming off the layout line. And then the next parameter would be at the rear part of the lot where it's not the applicant's property and it's that 300-foot buffer. We wanted to make sure that we weren't cutting into there, we weren't grading into there, we weren't using that area as a drainage basin. So we had to kind of use that end elevation as our other point. And then we were working against the existing drainage easement that's already in place for the neighboring development that's on this portion of the site. So we had all those factors that we were dealing with when we were trying to say, how can we make this development work and how can we make it feasible by also meeting all these criteria. So that's kind of how we got to where we were. So this was the square footage we needed. The driveway has to come in this location there due to site distances on the road. So then we would push everything over to this side and said, how can we get down to this level platform? So what you can see there is we have, and I think profile might show it better. It's a little faint, but what you can see on the plan is the red line that's on the plan is the existing topography for the site. So it comes down very sharp and comes all the way down to at the very bottom of the basin. And this is just from that cross section that we had on the last slide and goes down to elevation 26, give or take, at that bottom. So what we're really doing is we're having to create this platform. We're cutting up by the road and then moving all that material, which would go into this large area, which is about, say, 700 feet wide, 700 feet long, 800 feet wide, give or take, and having to fill that up about 35, 40 feet to get to the building platform elevation. So in conversations with, our client and whatnot, we figured out, we're gonna have to do all this geotechnical, because where that low area is shown on the plan, we have 2 or 3 of the buildings. So to make that happen, and again, this was all in conversations with contractors as well, what's the best way that we're going to be able to present this to the building department when it's time to go for a building permit? So in those conversations, we're going to have to fill each one of the, 35 feet at 1 foot lifts with structural information, with geotechs on site at the time, to build that up to be able to present to the building inspector that this site is suitable for the size buildings that we're putting on there and that there's going to be no structural issues going forward. So that's really where we got to that. Again, we have this really uneven topography going down into these big valleys, into these holes, and having to cut that for a section to be able to get down to this area where we could put a building. So again, the criteria kind of put us here. We've played with other elevations. We were a little lower at one point. We came up, the best fit for the area was this elevation around 59. And that's kind of what was dictated by all those different things. And the existing topography already out there is roughly 2 to 1. So we're really, on a lot of the disturbance that you see, it's not much of a cut. It's more of just catching that grade as we go up the slope. But I'd be happy to answer any questions from there.
Stefani and Flaherty Construction.
Mr. Timbrosa, why don't we complete the entire presentation and then we can bring those questions back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and when I yield the floor, if I could, Mr. Bolton, Mr. Chair, Bill Sims, the attorney for the property owner, would like to speak briefly, if that's okay. So again, we've got plans. I think I've walked you through them. Kevin, frankly, could probably do a better job than I could, but existing conditions, as you can see, we've got this site with this wildly varying topography, running, from Hedges Pond down lower to the rear of the site. This is the lotting plan, which again shows the lot in question. That's the subject of the proposal here. Again, this is maybe a little zoomed in site plan, so again, you get a little better look than that initial colorized plan at the dimensions of the building, the loading areas, the parking, et cetera. Again, happy to go into it, but at this point, I think it's a relatively straightforward layout. More detail here. If you wanted to go back to these, I've really got them here for reference if anyone has a specific question, but that's effectively what I have for you. I'm going to go back to the colorized plan to leave that on the screen in case it's helpful. And yeah, if Bill wants to have a word, that'd be great.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members. My name is Bill Sims. I am counsel to the Plymouth Regional Economic Foundation. And I am not presenting. I just want the board to be aware that the foundation is fully supportive of this particular project. We have evaluated it. This is not the first time that we've had a project presented to us, but we've done a fair amount of due diligence, have met with the developer, council, and at this point, we are very supportive of the project, and just want to be on the record for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. At this point, because we are not taking a vote this evening, we do not have staff recommendations. So I am going to bring this to the board for questions to the proponent. You want to go first? Mr. Grandy?
Okay. Thank you for the presentation. I know there's no vote happening here this evening. As far as the 350,000 cubic yards of fill being removed, is that the actual number? Has that been determined by your engineer?
Yeah, so we ran our calculations. We also sent it out to a contractor for bid, and it fell in that same kind of range with just a one-to-one kind of calculation.
Right. I'm going to make a comment here. This went through multiple iterations when this came before the planning board for this zone that was created by town meeting. And the effect of the amendment was to rezone 74 acres from medium lot residential and general commercial to a new zoning district, the Cedarville Village Enterprise District. So this would, in addition to, would minimize impacts on nearby residents, neighborhood. 134 acres of land is tax title purposes and put into permanent conservation, which was brought up earlier. But to get to the end game here, as far as this development is concerned, there's a lot of questions that come into play. How many phases, as far as any gravel removal is concerned? I did a calculation of 13,461 vehicle trips in an 18-wheeler at 26 yards of material in the vehicle. And if you went full bore for every single day of the year, that would be somewhere around 36 trips a day. So you could probably lessen that. You said you're looking for 3 years in your presentation. And I think it would probably be able to finish in 2, somewhere in that time frame, with a lot less vehicle trips. You also mentioned, I think, a cash bond that's going to be important. $2 million, which is going to go toward traffic improvements in the Cedarville Center area, which is a very important concern of all the residents down there. I am the liaison to the Cedarville Steering Committee, and I can tell you, I was on the Cedarville Steering Committee also, and this has been an ongoing situation as far as the traffic is concerned down in the Cedarville Village Center area. it's horrendous, especially in the summer. Now we're talking about redoing the Sagamore Bridge also, which is going to affect traffic in Cedarville also. So Cedarville Steering Committee has already been involved in meetings, and hopefully we're going to have someone from the Department of Transportation at the next meeting also on the 18th, or at least the one after that, because we are meeting next Wednesday with the Cedarville Steering Committee, and I will be in attendance for that meeting also. I'm sure with this $2 million, we're working with the Old Colony Planning Council also, as far as funding is concerned. I would ask that from staff.
That's correct.
That's correct. So, traffic study, is that already being done by the Old Colony Planning Council, if one has already been done already? Or is there one going to be in the process, which would be required to do to add the vehicle trips? And get into time of day with, when you're doing any gravel removal with school buses in the morning, so there'll be all kinds of different stipulations decided upon at a later date as far as ensuring that the traffic doesn't affect your gravel removal, affect not only the roads, but the traffic and the residents in the area also. So with that, I don't want to say everything, because I'd like to leave some questions from members of the board also that have questions also. So those are just a few. I'm sure you'll hear a lot more come next Wednesday. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Grandy. Mr. Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, there's no hiding from the fact that the grading is an issue here, both for myself and I think for members of the public who would love to have something to say about it at this point, but will have their chance down the road. So, unfortunately, you're in the hot seat for a while, I guess. I looked over the plans, and I'm seeing, based on your existing conditions plan, there was an isolated wetland that's going to be replicated elsewhere. The elevation of that is around 26. Is that about right?
Correct.
Kevin? Okay. So, and the soils out here, I'm going to assume you did some test pits.
So as the preliminary going through the process, Beals and Thomas did a number of soil test pits in 2018, I think it was 2020, that we referred to on the site. And they're on the plans. I don't know the exact date, but it was when the initial kind of process that they took through from a conceptual and feasibility standpoint. They did a lot of test pits out there.
Okay, and do you happen to know, I did not take it upon myself to look at the soil logs, but I'm going to guess there's sand.
There is, yeah, at varying depths and whatnot, but it's sand out there.
Okay, I've seen soils on adjacent sites, very sandy. So your ultimate grade on the pad, for lack of a better word, is around 58, 59, somewhere in that range?
It's 59. I mean, on a site that big and flat, there's some variations to pitch water
But you
this way
need to
and that
go-
way, but,
yeah.
just 59 was kind of the baseline elevation that we were.
Understood. So would it be fair to say that the elevation of the wetland would be approximately the elevation of the groundwater? Within,
Yeah, again, I'm trying to go from memory right now. One of the test pits that they did at that lower elevation, they encountered groundwater, I think, down at 54 inches at the 26 or 27 elevation. So the groundwater elevation is, I would say, hover around that 26. From the top of my memory, I couldn't recall exactly which number it is.
so in the end, what I'm working towards here is you're going to have a groundwater separation from the parking area of around 34 feet.
Correct.
And just, because I know you know the answer, what does the DEP say is an appropriate separation of groundwater for, say, sewage effluent?
Yeah, so it meets all Title V standards. Plymouth has a regulation where, you have to do mounting calculations if you're within 4 feet. So we're substantially above any sort of, groundwater issues or separation distances that we need to hold.
All right, so point being that the DEP has said 5 feet is a sufficient separation to groundwater from sewage
For
effluent.
septic systems, correct.
All right, so you were looking at a separation of 30 plus.
Correct.
Maybe if we look at the bottom of your recharge basin down at 52, maybe around 30 for a separation or something like that.
Correct.
So that I feel more comfortable knowing that you have a significant separation of groundwater. Your treatment system for the surface runoff and the stormwater is well above the groundwater.
Correct.
So I think that argument that this could in any way be damaging to the groundwater maybe bears further investigation, but I think 34 feet of separation is a pretty good number. Granted, it could always be more, but certainly if sewage can be within 5 feet of the groundwater, treated stormwater runoff, I think at 34 feet is pretty acceptable. So I'm comfortable with that. What I am not terribly comfortable with is this gigantic 2-to-1 slope of a 90-foot slope at 2-to-1. Even if it's fenced off at the top, I guarantee you some kid's going to wander in there in the winter and take his sled down it and probably have a great time until he reaches the bottom. Many projects like this, or large cuts or fills like this, you often see benching. In fact, even at the Cantor Court subdivision right down the street there, they had benching built into the slopes. So was any consideration given to that?
So we thought about it, because typically when we do a 50-foot vertical swing from that top of slope to wherever that bottom elevation is, you put a 10-foot bench in to separate, kind of dissipate some of the water as it rushes down the hill. Here, where we were trying to maximize space, and where we have had previously issues with that benching, how it kind of builds up water and then there's blowouts as they go through the benching on similar projects to this. We worked with DPW and the engineering department to put, a series of logs and kind of breaks in that slope. So our revised plans have stabilizing logs in that slope, and it's less for safety. I mean, safety, we have the fence up top, but the reason more would be so that water is not just flying down the hill. So we have kind of a way to channel the water and the runoff that comes down that way. And it really, again, for the DPW purposes, we did that because it's really just the surface slope that's getting the water. There's not much water coming from, Hedges Pond or anything like that. Mm-hmm. It's really just what hits the slope. But they were satisfied with that response. But from a safety standpoint, I don't think the applicant has any problem putting additional fencing in or, doing it that way for safety reasons.
Okay.
But that's another reason why we left that buffer to the road.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to ask the question. I'll certainly defer to the professional engineer as to how you're going to mitigate that potential issue.
Right.
But I just wanted to bring it up that it's dramatic.
Yeah.
The other question I have is, I know that there's proposed uses in here, and whether they're already determined or agreed upon or set in stone or cast in jello, the one proposed use, which is troubling to me only from the aspect of parking. So you have a proposed recreation facility with 2 hockey rinks in there. And I think I'd like to know, have you been through the calculation of what the required parking? And I know that this is a unified complex, so there'll be shared parking. But having been to a hockey game or two, when it's time for the team on the ice to leave and the next team to come in, parking and traffic can really be a nightmare. So I'm without having specific comments as to, I think your number's 10% off or anything like that. Can you address how you calculated that? Is it a per stadium seat, number of spaces per seat or something like that? And how can you really, my gut look at it looks like there's maybe not enough parking.
So what we did is, since the town zoning bylaw doesn't have any strict and black and white kind of parking spaces for recreation facilities, it's really left up to the building inspector as a part of submitting the permit and whatnot. So we pulled a study from, I think it was Colorado or California, that had a little bit better kind of this many rinks, this many seats, this many parking spaces. So that's how we kind of came up with that criteria for what we're showing now. But another reason why, and we're not asking for any waivers from, parking requirements or whatnot, but, we were a little bit unsure exactly how many spaces. So with that in mind, we have all that additional parking, that are for the other uses that we don't expect to be, maybe going on at the same time as the hockey rink, which kind of plays into the unified complex. But that's how we, you know, again, without a strict kind of Plymouth zoning bylaw dictating how many spaces were required based off square footage or based off seats, that's kind of how we came up with
Right,
it. And it's not
certainly,
designed yet either.
you can't get a waiver to a regulation that doesn't exist, right?
Correct.
So,
But that's that's at least the thought process was, we try to find a different study that had a little bit more concrete, you know, information about what was required.
okay, so I think we'd probably like to see a tabulation or some sort of the rationale behind the parking. Just, I know the scale of these plans, these are, you know, I think 80 scale or something like that, so it's a little tough to get a feel for how big this project actually is. I think that the only other, the positive comment, I really like the fact that there's a 300-foot buffer to the abutting properties. I think and that there are some residential properties over there, and I think 300 is actually appropriate, you know, even as a minimum for an operation like this. One other thing I want to know about is the material that is going to be exported, or actually, let me back up a little bit. Would it be possible to perhaps reduce some of the export by providing a small 4, 6, 8-foot retaining wall at the back of the site, which you said is your design point, to then reduce the amount of traffic, the amount of export, the amount of trucks and all that sort of stuff, to maybe bring that pad level up from the 58 or so to, you know, 60, 63, 65, something like that. Thereby, you know, changing that elevation over such a big area is going to be a big number. So I'm wondering if there was consideration to possibly matching that grade at the back where the buffer is with a small, you know, reasonable retaining wall that would then reduce the amount of yardage that needs to be exported significantly. And that's something I think it's not, I understand you've been through many iterations on this, and I think it's just something I'd ask you to consider and take a look at.
Yeah, and I think, you know, from a team standpoint, we'd be happy in this time to kind of talk over options to see if that's feasible and, you know, kind of see if there's any other way that we can kind of make that elevation, like you say, bring up the grade a little bit more. But we'll have, you know, again, there's a lot of moving pieces with, you know, trying to make this site feasible from every standpoint with all the, you know, I would guess I'd call it moving earth on site work with, you know, that type of thing. But yeah, we would definitely discuss it with the team.
My understanding is that I suspect it may end up give you maybe a little more footprint in a flat area to work with if there's less of a cut that's required. But again, you're the engineer. I'm just looking at these plans from my perspective. And my intent in that is not just because I want you to reduce that volume as because I want you to reduce your profit or anything like that. That's not the point here. The point is what's best for Plymouth, what's best for the residents around there. And the less truck trips in and out of there is definitely a good thing. I mean, that's a tough road, and it's a tough road to meet an 18-wheeler heading the other direction, some of those sharp curves and so on. So, you know, I don't want to be misunderstood in that I'm looking for less yards because, you know, Mr. Pontiff's going to make too much money on this. That's not correct. It's what is the best for the community, the surrounding community, and the community as a whole. I think the project as a whole is good for the community, and I think it's a good project, and it is going to get developed. We're in no position to tell town meeting that it's not going to. Town meeting has decided that this project is going to get built. It's just a matter of, and I think you've done a decent job here, but I think perhaps some tuning might make it a little more palatable. I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Mr. Donaldson.
So, Mr. Bennett stole one of my major questions, and he was very thorough in asking in regards to usage. My question in regards to usage is, why determine a skating rink, or was there any other proposals that was going to be maybe a better fit for the community, and how did this, in regards to a skating rink, come into play in regards to this development? And just to give you a little backdrop, this is new to me. I wasn't here in 2018 when all this was decided, so you're kind of bringing me up to speed with the explanation.
Well, that's simple. Mr. Pontiff has 4 children who play hockey, so that's really in his best interest to, I'm kidding. That's not true. Why did he pick why is a hockey rink proposed? I think, we've heard from various people that that's actually a nice amenity in the sense it's more of a public good than some other uses. For instance, another warehouse, right? I mean, it does have a recreational community aspect to it. So, I think that was viewed as a positive. I can't speak for the foundation, but I think that was embraced by them to some degree, and also an expression of interest. I mean, as part of this process in determining feasibility, trying to make the site work, my clients entertained a number of potential uses, and this was one that, again, dovetailed well, we thought, with some of the other uses. For instance, the hours during which a hockey rink might see the most use are different from the hours the lumberyard is busiest. So again, in the spirit of a unified complex, that was another consideration.
And is there a community center in Cedarville?
I don't know the answer to that.
No. We use the fire station for the community meeting rooms for the Village Center Steering Committee. There is no center to speak of.
Okay. And nothing like the Manamet Youth Center, nothing like that as well in that area? No. Okay. Thank you. That's all I had. Actually, I didn't know the answer to those questions. I just wanted to hear it publicly, but thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Donaldson. So, as this matter goes forward, there's 2 aspects to this. Aspect number 1 is the earth removal and our responsibility to address that. I'm going to reference that first. So, our role is called for first under Town Bylaw 203-2C3. And in that, the building commissioners to forward copies of the application to the planning board for review. The planning board is to consider if, in their opinion, the earth removal operation requires the special permit minimum conditions and safeguards set forth in Section 4 of the bylaw. And we're supposed to issue that advisory opinion within 21 days of receipt. First and foremost, I understand that there's a potential issue that we have not responded within that 21 days, but that the applicant has made clear that they are not holding us to that they are willing to continue to allow us to do the review. Is that correct, Mr. D'Ambrosa?
Yes, Mr. Chair. As mentioned, we're happy to volunteer most of those conditions.
Okay. So that at least takes one issue off the table, and that there is a potential argument, and I'm not going to address it, but there was a potential argument that we literally have waived our rights to address this. But the applicant has said, we're not holding to that. And we've now heard that from their counsel, and we appreciate that. So we then have to make that determination. The learned colleague to the left and to the right, and my colleague on Zoom, all have certain aspects of their background, Mr. Donaldson by education, Mr. Grandy, Mr. Bennett by both education and experience in construction. My background is, as an attorney, is in reviewing construction projects. So I'm pretty good at reviewing plans, but nowhere near as good as they are. I need to see it for myself. So first things first, before I can even cogently make a comment about what is appropriate, reasonable, necessary, I need to see the site. So I'm going to make a request that the planning board be able to schedule a site visit in order to take that opportunity.
Sure, at your convenience, absolutely.
Thank you. So that's step 1. Then step 2, we have the unified complex. And the unified complex is something that's obviously intended to create an opportunity to best use a parcel without a lot of the sometimes, I say sometimes, unnecessary addition of parking that is never used. We have a lot of uses that have very strict or excessive parking requirements, many of which we've discovered and probably do need to address as we go forward, result in instances in which we have a building with a lot of parking that is never used. And that either results in a waste of the commercial opportunity and or excess impervious space, things that could otherwise have been left natural or regraded and revegetated. But in order to make that determination as to what a unified complex makes sense, we need to understand what those parking requirements really should look like. And in addition to that, how those uses affect traffic, not just off-site, but within the site. So with that, the discussion of the skating rink is one that'll be helpful to have some better understanding. We certainly would appreciate, as you've indicated, there's no clear regulation on that, so your studies and that information would be very valuable, I believe, to this board in order to reach those determinations. I think we have a pretty good idea as to what types of traffic a lumberyard generates. Then we get to the, I don't want to call it the elephant on the site, but it's pretty close to that, 176,000 square foot warehouse. 4 acres, as Mr. Bennett notes. Larger than the Amazon distribution facility that is in Plymouth and Kingston. So that causes some question because we don't know what that warehouse is holding. We don't know if that's a warehouse that is going to be calling for occasional trips from it, regular trips from it, constant trips from it. And obviously that is going to be a concern to us with respect to traffic. The money's going to help study and create some alleviation on Hedges Pond Road are greatly appreciated by the community. But it is no surprise to anyone that that road needs massive overhaul just to accommodate what occurs today on a daily basis. Any person who has traveled that road on a regular basis has discovered that it doesn't even necessarily matter which time of day you're doing. You can get stuck quite a bit trying to drive around that road. So any assistance as we get through this process, I'm just letting you know, any assistance that you can provide the board in helping it understand what types of traffic we're talking about. Because ultimately, when we look at creating a unified complex, as Mr. Bennett said, our primary concern is the good of the community. And that's the community not just around that particular site, but as a whole. But our priority when it comes to traffic has to be the community that's there. And the people who need to get through Hedges Pond Road are going to need to get through Hedges Pond Road. And if there's excessive to the point of impossible traffic created by something, we're going to need to address that. Obviously, as well, just for emergency services use, that's always a concern as well. It's a public safety matter, it's a resident and convenience matter, it's a quality of life matter. So there's a lot of balance to be put through this. We certainly, again, as Mr. Bennett said, are mindful and very respectful of the fact that town meeting has dedicated this site to economic development. It is not for us to say, no, we do not overrule the, as you mentioned, extraordinary rare instance of a unanimous town meeting vote. Those are the elected representatives who are designated to make that determination. The planning board gave its advisory opinion, and town meeting voted to proceed. So we're charged with carrying out the directive of town meeting, as it is the directive of the residents. We are only tasked with trying to do that in the best possible fashion for everyone. So it is a balance. It's going to be a compromise. So as we proceed with that, we're going to ask you to look at these various things, give us as much information as possible, and allow us to work towards the best compromise. And I will use a phrase that I've been told many times by judges, arbitrators, and mediators, one I'm sure you've heard, that compromise is when nobody walks away happy. So I can expect that whatever the final determination is of this board, people are going to have their gripes and complaints, and I understand that. And they will, I'm sure, all be appropriate and legitimate ones. And that's what we have to do when we have to balance interests. So when we do proceed, again, I'd like to just make sure that we're proceeding on the greatest amount of information conceivably possible, and this board will do its very best to explain to everyone what its rationale is when reaching that final determination. Is there anything further that you wish to address?
No, thank you.
Okay, at this time, I will entertain a motion to continue this matter to a later date.
Mr. Chair, do you need, I'm not sure what your protocol is, but just for your convenience, do you need to schedule, or do you want to schedule the site visit now, or do you want to communicate?
I'd like to communicate that
Okay.
separately. I want to make sure, I will go through the department will confer with all of the members, and we will try and create an opportunity for as many members. We may have to request different dates for different people. We certainly want to make sure that every board member has the opportunity, and so that may, just as a scheduling matter, require a couple of different times, but so I'd like to coordinate that through staff.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you. So at this point, I will entertain a motion to continue this matter.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Very good. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Mr. Donaldson?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Grandy?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Next on our agenda this evening is ZBA 4133, 101 Carver Road, Scranton Holdings Corp. Special permit required per section 203-3D4D to construct a freestanding sign less than 10 feet from a street layout. So this is a ZBA matter. We are advisory to the ZBA, and the final determination will be made by that board. If everyone could please leave quietly and conduct your conversations outside to allow the board to please continue its business, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you. Mr. Sims.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Grandy, members of the board. I'm here on behalf of Scranton Holdings, owner of the property, typically known as West Plymouth Plaza. Those members of the board who were here previously, a year or two ago, remember that we were here for another sign permit application for pylon sign located on the Carver Road side of this property. This evening, I'm here with myself, Don Bracken Engineering, and by Zoom, if necessary, we have Rebecca Miller from, oh, there, is she there? Laura Lynn, okay. Is that Rebecca? Anyway, we have people here to address most of the issues. This is a request for a special permit per 203-3, section D.4.D. The sign to be located is within the 10-foot setback, and accordingly we will need permission from zoning and respectfully request a favorable recommendation from the planning board for this particular pylon sign. I will let Dawn walk you through the project, address the specific questions that you may have for this. I'm going to guess that everybody is pretty familiar with the location. As I said earlier, some of you sat on the previous case. For the Carver Road entrance, this is on the Route 80 side. As you come in from that side, there are two entrances there. This is the first entrance that you'll approach if you're coming north to south, and it's a location where signage is super important to direct traffic and for presentation of the businesses that are located within the plaza. Without consuming too much more time on that, I'll turn this over to Don Bracken to explain the engineering and signage location and address any questions that the board may have.
Thank you, Don Bracken, Bracken Engineering. As Bill said, the project abuts two roadways, Carver Road to the south and Plimpton Road to the north. Almost 2 years ago, we received a special permit from the zoning board to have more than one sign on the property. There are currently two signs on the property, the main sign at the main entrance on Carver Road and another sign, both pylon signs, just to the east of the Papagenos on Plimpton Road. The sign that we're seeking permission for is at the northwest corner of the site, where currently there is no sign. But that is the sign that was approved for the special permit. Strictly, the special permit was just for the number of signs. This special permit is to install the sign within 10 feet of the roadway layout. The reason for this is because it's a very difficult area to see the signage that was proposed close to the roadway. Getting it closer to the actual roadway surface would enable more people to see the sign. Even right now with the sign location, it's approximately 38 feet from the actual edge of the roadway. I don't know if anyone's been out there, but we've staked out the sign location, and when you're out there, you can see there's still a substantial difference of the setback to the actual roadway itself. One thing I did notice in getting ready for tonight's meeting, looking at the proposed sign, which has like 33.5 or so square feet of signage, that requirement was based on the original sign being 10 feet from the roadway. If the sign is 10 feet from the roadway, you have a maximum of 50 square feet. So we complied with it on the last application, and then on this application I see that because it's within the 10 feet now, the maximum sign size is 30 square feet. So we're going to have to reduce this sign by, what is it, 3 square feet or something like that. But we're going to keep the width of it the same. We'll just reduce the height of it to make it comply with the 30 square feet. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'll take it back to staff first. Ms. Lind?
Thank you. As you've been informed, this was previously approved by the Zoning Board of Appeals back in 2022 for the sign, and the design was consistent. At this time, the applicant is coming back for the location of the sign. Given that there's no substantial detriment to any pedestrian or neighborhood impact, we do find this is an appropriate use in the general commercial district. We are recommending that this be recommended to the Zoning Board of Appeals to be granted pursuant to the following conditions. That would be if any back taxes, fees, or penalties are owed to the town, evidence that those are paid be provided. Any lighting will be compliant with our light pollution section of our bylaw. As this is within the Mass DOT state roadway, that they'll have to work with the State Department of Transportation on permitting for approval within the state highway layout. And we've recommended that the proposed sign be pushed back. Originally, they were looking for a 0 setback. We're looking for 1 foot to allow for construction and survey tolerances. In additional information submitted for the application, Bracken Engineering has agreed to do this. So The final conditions would be that the petitioner is encouraged to improve the existing internal traffic flow with signing and pavement markings to the extent possible, and that the address of the facility, 101 Carver Road, be included on the proposed sign.
Thank you. I'm seeing no one in the room, so I'm assuming that no one wants public comment. Is there anyone online who wishes to comment on this?
If anyone on Zoom would like to be recognized, please make yourself known.
I'm Rebecca Miller, Director of Sales and Property for the West Plymouth Square. I have nothing that I need to add, but I'm here if there's any questions or if anybody needs clarification.
Thank you very much. Okay, I will bring it back to the board if there's any questions, comments. Mr. Grandy.
I have no questions, and I'm very happy that the address is going on the sign, because that's an important aspect, I think, with the address on there. So, that's no questions, it's only that one comment, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Grandy. Mr. Donaldson.
I have no questions at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Bennett.
Ditto, no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. And I thank you for your presentation. I think you've answered the questions. I think that at this point, we're ready to take a motion. I think the motion, however, has to also stress that as part of the conditions that the sign be reduced in size in accordance with the requirements for being within that 10-foot area of the roadway. And I will say that I did go out and did see the staking of the sign, and I am comfortable that the sign itself, when placed there, would not impede traffic vision or things like that. That's the only real concern when you're placing something that close to a roadway. It is sufficiently far back that vehicles will be past that sign and be able to see oncoming traffic. So I was comfortable with that.
And that's obviously the objective, yes. Thank you.
So with that, I will entertain a motion to recommend approval subject to the conditions set forth by staff with that additional recommendation.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? In favor, Mr. Donaldson.
Yes.
Mr. Bennett.
Yes.
Mr. Grandy.
Yes.
And myself, yes. Thank you very much. Good luck at the ZBA.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Members of the board, thank you.
The last item on our agenda tonight, ZBA 4134, 693 State Road, NH Properties, LLC. Special permit required per section 205-10, general commercial, and use table to modify an existing vehicular-related use per dimensional table footage 11D to waive maximum front setback requirement to construct a detached garage with office space. Again, we are advisory to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and for those people who may be curious about that phrase, yes, that is to waive the maximum front setback as opposed to what everyone else normally hears, which is our minimum front setback. And that's something unique to this particular village district. Good evening.
Good evening. Matt Sheridan from Sheridan Home Builders. I'm here with Kevin Flaherty, and we're representing NH Properties, the owner of the property at 693 State Road. I became acquainted with NH Properties through a rehab project I just completed in Manamet at 687 State Road, across from 42 Degrees North. The owners approached me, said they'd like to build an accessory building for warehousing and storage, and we moved forward with the site design and the building design, and we're here tonight, hopefully for a favorable recommendation to the ZBA. So basically, the way Kevin had designed the site, we held everything back as far from the street as possible. We built the building into an existing slope to minimize the height, so that way it'll be barely visible from State Road. We've addressed all of the DPW comments. We're just waiting for a clean letter back that we hope to have by the ZBA. I spoke with fire department today. Dave Malaguti and fire department's completely satisfied with all of our revisions. They just asked for an official turning analysis plan, which Kevin's going to provide to them. It's honestly very cut and dry. Kevin is here to answer any questions about engineering on the site, if you have any. And I'll turn it over to Kevin just to go through the grading and the drainage with you guys.
Kevin Flaherty, Flaherty and Stefani for the record. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit if I can, just, so you guys can see it a little bit better. So as Matt said, we're basically kind of lining up the accessory building back where the existing auto body shop is. You know, holding 60 feet, which is the waiver we're requesting, would be a little bit, you know, it wouldn't be practical in a situation like this with where the structure is. We're also, you know, so the auto body was previously approved back in 1978 through a special permit. They had a minor modification, I think, back somewhere in the early 80s to expand it a little bit. So they really haven't, you know, it hasn't been in front of any of the boards in the last 30, 40 years. So this is just kind of an update of the plan, and that's kind of where the building department wanted to go with it. So we have the building over here on kind of the right side of the property, off to the right of this building here. We're really not changing any of the access or the state curb cut up here. We're adding a little bit of drainage per conversations with the DPW to handle, you know, even though we're not altering this at all, just a little bit of an improvement from runoff going on to State Road. We come back here where, you know, there's this existing asphalt here, concrete kind of pad here. So our new building's coming off this way. This is all going to be asphalt in here. They currently have no, you know, treatment or anything like that for the existing runoff that's on site. We're adding catch basins, and then we're adding a water quality unit right here to kind of treat any sort of impervious or runoff from the asphalt areas and to put into our new recharge system, which is right here. The back area over here is going to be kind of a, you know, it's existing gravel, but we're going to leave it as a gravel parking and kind of designate better spots for, you know, employees and whatnot to park kind of behind the building to clean up the site a little bit. This is the existing tree line that's over this way. We have no intention of cutting any additional area into the buffer. We're actually going to be planting a couple additional trees. I don't expect there to be any visual from this multi-family apartment building over here. The grade kind of drops back down, so this is kind of a wooded berm that sits in between the two properties. But just as, you know, a good kind of a gift, we're adding a couple of trees on the backside and then as well up here by the parking area. DPW wanted to make sure that, you know, this walkway here to the new office was ADA compliant, so we've kind of met that. Septic systems over here. Mr. Bennett brought up at the steering committee meeting that the existing bay, which we kind of didn't catch going through it, just being concerned with the new building, had still a oil grit separator that went to the existing leach pit. So to make sure we brought this up to kind of code with all the rest of the standards in the building code, we added a new 1,500-gallon holding tank back here that will kind of act in place of where, you know, everything was going to the existing septic. So we're also doing a little bit improvement on the existing building to kind of clean up the whole site that hasn't really been, you know, altered too much over the years. And I think that's it. You know, really, we're limited to this side of the site. There's this kind of massive Eversource easement or NSTAR easement that runs all the way over this way. This 100-foot easement that's across. So we're really trying to, that's why we're holding everything that way. But I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Staff?
Thank you. Yes, so as you've heard, this is a request to expand an existing use that's been permitted back in 1978 and then expanded again in 1984. At this point, in addition, due to the Manamet Village maximum setback of 60 feet, this setback is actually an improvement in the existing nonconformity. They're proposing a setback of 260 feet. The existing setback is over 330 feet. The background to the 60-foot maximum allowed in the village area was intended to create a village feel for Manamet Village among some of the other villages, to discourage strip mall development patterns. However, this use specifically requires that all automotive repair activities and areas are screened from view from the public street. So in this particular instance, we find that this is an appropriate setback for this expanded use. The staff is recommending at this point that the special permit be granted by the Zoning Board of Appeals, that this board recommend that, with the conditions that, as with all of them, if there's any taxes, fees, or penalties owed to the town, evidence of that payment be provided, that prior to issuance of a building permit, the plans be substantially revised to address all of those comments provided by town engineering and fire departments. And then lastly, I want to note that this is located in the Aquifer Protection District Zone 3, so that there are several materials listed as prohibited from being stored in this district, that the building commissioner should review the proposed uses with the future tenants for compliance with that bylaw. Other than that, that's all we have.
Thank you. I'm going to bring it to the board, and since I know Mr. Bennett has already dug into this, I will start with Mr. Bennett.
No, I have no further questions other than the ones we asked at the Manamet Village Steering Committee. Got a few committees going on, and I'm happy to see that they were addressed. So, good job.
Thank you. Mr. Donaldson.
I don't have any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Grandy?
Just one or two questions. So the business there now is you work on vehicles, automobiles? Is that what the process is, the building, yes?
Yes, the existing building's used as a minor automotive repair shop.
Okay, so the addition, is that going to be auto repair in that section also?
No, they're building this building just for warehousing and office space. So to store parts, et cetera, big bulky boxes.
Okay.
They're not looking to use that as actual shop space.
Now, does the building have a tight tank already in the front, in the front section?
The
Working on
new
the
building
vehicles?
will have a tight tank. Oh,
That's proposed.
That's
Yeah.
proposed.
So this, I think if you're referring to this one out here,
Yeah,
this is a proposed tight tank just for the four drains.
right. So you're going to add a tight tank to this project also?
yes, we're adding a tight tank for the existing building.
Okay, so that was one for me that was important, as it is an aquifer protection zone. Next question, is the building sprinkled?
No, it's only 4,400 square feet.
Now you're adding how many more square feet? Is that with this addition?
The building we're proposing is only 4,400 square feet.
Gotcha.
So Battalion Chief Malaguti said it wouldn't be necessary to sprinkle it.
All right, just want to make sure that you don't get hit with it later, so to speak. But those were my questions, and thank you for adding the tight tank.
Thank you, Mr. Grandy. Question for staff. With respect to the ZBA application, am I correct that the reason that this is going to the ZBA is because they are looking for relief from the maximum setback
Correct, and the expansion of the use.
and the expansion of the pre-existing use?
Yes.
Okay, well, since they're really not expanding the pre-existing use, but rather just creating storage for the pre-existing use, that gives me comfort. And with respect to the maximum setback, I believe the explanation is that provided by staff, that yes, I think while we generally like the idea of avoiding the strip mall appearance in our village districts, that does not mean that we're encouraging storage and automotive right on our major roads. So this is certainly an appropriate location to have something that is set back further. So with that, I'm comfortable with that, so thank you. I'm going to assume that there is nobody who has public comment questions, as there's nobody in the room, and last I saw on Zoom, it was only people who are here for this matter.
Correct, we only have Mr. Donaldson on Zoom.
Okay. So that being said, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Recommend approval. I have a motion to recommend approval.
Based on, question, based on staff's recommendations, right?
As always, yes.
Okay.
I have a motion from Mr. Bennett, and a second from Mr. Donaldson. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Mr. Grandy?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Donaldson?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Thank you, gentlemen. Good
Thank
luck
you.
at the ZBA.
Thank you.
Any other matters this evening that need to be brought up? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Call the roll. Mr. Donaldson?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Grandy?
Yes.
And I will say yes as well. Thank you, everyone. This meeting of the Planning Board is adjourned.